Program once again. Part 2 of a study of Huntington Harbor is for this program. This is me, Pat Windrow, at the Cable Easel. Working as usual in a very realistic style. I think I felt paint on my face there. And bringing you the information which makes my paintings what they are. When I'm live, of course, you can call and we can talk about it. When I'm not, you'll just have to take what I say as what I say, and that's the instruction for the day. The first part of this was the layout, and the second part is the application of color beginning from the most farther away point, working from the middle ground to the foreground, and hopefully the foreground will work. There is the scene shot during this month, and the summer is on its way. Spring and summer at this point look very much the same. There is almost no difference in the general landscape between now and the entire summer. So dealing with the foliage, the color schemes are pretty much the same now as they will be later. But I'm dealing now with the water area, which is one of my favorite places. Is water, as you can tell, and what happens to water and the surface of it at various times of day and also under various circumstances. As this tape progresses, you will see that at one point there is going to be some activity on the water. I have been looking at this tape, and I'm able to tell you that somewhere along here there is going to be a disturbance on the water by probably the presence of a boat, and something very interesting happens. So I almost feel like the news people saying, don't forget to tune in at 11, we're going to tell you about all the disasters of the day, just be patient. So what I'm going to do is to tell you to look forward to seeing that the surface of this particular presumably calm little cove is going to change, and the reason that I bring that up is that as a painter, you learn to go with the flow, as it were. Even, I don't mean that as a pun because we're dealing with water. That when the changes take place, if they're interesting, you have to be able to adapt almost instantaneously and say, oh, that's what I want to capture in here. So here is the blend going from the reflection of the trees above, which is obviously green. In most of the cases, I'm going to make it really green because sometimes the transmission of these colors tends to be a little bit dull, and I'm in the mood for using brilliant color. Here is the green that's reflected with a sort of a soft tone coming from some surface disturbance, and then as it gets progressively closer to the foreground, the blue blends and becomes a little bit less dark than it is in the background, and these strokes are purposeful strokes. I could have used palette knife such as I did on the trees, but I want to show you that you can mix the techniques. You can mix palette knife with brush strokes. The brush strokes, as you can see, take longer. That should not make any difference. The length of time it takes to do a painting should not enter into the problem. Many times the question, many times than I even like to answer, is people say, how long did it take you to do that? I'm not sure that I'm ever really able to answer the question, nor am I willing to answer that question, because taking the time, the question implies that if it takes too long, they're not interested. If it takes too long, then you probably ought not to have started the painting in the first place. the length of time, of course, can enter into it. I mean, when you think that a painting in Belgium called the Mystic Lamb, the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, took two painting brothers, the Van Eyck brothers, 13 years to do. That's what you would call time. But for the average length of time for a painting should not enter into any of the business of doing it. So here is the break in the, if you saw the first program, the break in the trees affords this particular reflection in the water of the pale blue sky. You fuzz up the edges a little bit, and then something interesting happens next to it. The phone pole or light pole, or whatever that white vertical is in the distance, it looks to me like a sunstruck light pole, is going to cast its reflection in the water as well. But as you can see, the water technique is different than the foliage technique. And once in a while you can pull the color across the paler parts and get the surface of the water more clearly interpreted by pulling the color across this pale area here, such as you're seeing me do here. Yeah, sometimes I have to stop talking because I'm concentrating, and stopping talking means that there's that dreaded happening which is called dead air. The surface of the water has now changed and done something interesting, so I'm going to pick up on that. There is a nice dark area that is working its way across the surface here, which I find, which is exactly what I was talking about before. When these changes happen, one should be able to adapt and latch onto it at that moment, because the wind being what it is, and the out of doors being what it is, the chances are of that happening again is probably remote. And if it appeals to you, you put it in at that moment. So let me deal with the water area, and then carry on and start to work towards the foreground, the middle ground, and the really yucky business of trying to make the foreground work. Because as I have said many times before, the foreground can make or break it. I'm going to use a sort of a muted whitish tone for that phone pole over there. I'm going to change my brush and use a very small one to get the thinness of it, because you have to try to remember that proportion is as important as just about anything else. I'm going to put that pole in now, and on its placement is approximately here. And as you can see, you have to apply it with what I like to call one masterful stroke, which is doesn't mean to boast, but by that I mean one stroke that isn't going to wiggle too badly. This one back here is obviously behind some of the trees, and then there is a sort of a white object here which may or may not be part of a house, and there's a vertical, and there's also a sort of a little arrangement here, probably something on a roof. Maybe this is a balcony, maybe this is another column, but the evidence of human habitation is here somewhere in between the trees, and it ought to just be just indicated. Here is the reflection. I'm using my little finger as a leaning post, because that's the only way you can steady yourself. And here is the reflection of this pole right here. I will simply put it in and then break it. If the surface of the water demands breaking it, I will do that while the paint is still wet. So let me just run a slight line through it to give you the illusion that it is in fact just a reflection. And that's the magic of this kind of thing, whereby you can give the illusion that you're seeing something which is nothing more than paint on a flat surface. All right. There is a little bit of texture in the water in the foreground here, not very much, but there is some. Now this line has disappeared since I last did it, but I'm going to leave it there. And some of the texture in the water is indicated here by some little tiny wavelets on the surface, and that'll give you some feeling about it. And then you unpaint it later if it's too obvious. But if it's there, by all means, it will add interest to the painting, and it does not have to be an actual anatomical study of these little wavelets. But they are definitely there, meaning that the interpretation that you're doing is as faithful as you can get. Comes now the need to do the foreground. I'm going to use a palette knife on this, I'm going to clear this board of the greens and wipe it on the side. The use of palette knife, as I've said many times, is very intriguing. It opens up a whole new world of paint application, and one of the more friendly parts of palette knife is that it can get colors so absolutely pure and clean, because when you see I clean off the knife, there is no paint left on it at all except old crusted stuff back here. But you can clean this thoroughly and then get a brand new clear color going for you. I'm going to mix it here on the palette because I have the need to get very clean color, and I could pick up some color from my palette, which I don't want to do. This is too bright yellow. I'm going to tone it down with some of this brown. This is called spectrum brown. It's too pink. We take that off. When you mix the wrong color, don't attempt to save it. Just start again. It's a fool's errand to think that you can save it if you put too much color in the first place, because you wind up with a mountain of color that you can't live long enough to use. It becomes so huge because some colors are more vibrant than others, and that spectrum brown is about as lethal a color as you can get. It will go miles. You could probably tint enough paint to paint the World Trade Center with just a little glob of spectrum brown. So some colors need to be you need to be warned about them. Here is that grayish tone that is hugging the shoreline, and I've changed it to the palette knife because the technique warrants it. The technique is now a little bit rougher than the water. It is sand and stones and rocks, and I believe that this may make some sense to people, especially in answer to the question about you have so many different techniques. The techniques are merely because of the textures which I am interpreting. So there's the gray, and let me see, is it now time to count the colors? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with a blend of the blues and so on, and the dark greens are already there, and the gray is now the 7th color on here. I don't mean to make a point of counting colors, but it's part of the information that I want you to have as possibly an explanation of what I'm doing. I cannot really explain everything that I do. I think that that's why this is a demonstrational show. And by the way, whether I've mentioned it before or not, this program has been nominated for the 3rd time for an ACE Award. So those results will come next month, I believe, and you'll be the first to know, of course. And it's under the category of instruction and demonstration. So my demonstrations of what I do are part of this program, and I do the best I can to cover all phases of what I'm doing. What I'm doing here is this dark and obviously wet area in the foreground. Something on the left side of the tape up there is producing water that is coming out of somewhere and giving a dark tone to this beach. I very rarely use black, but sometimes black is the only way that you're going to be able to get the dullness that comes from certain conditions on sand. When sand gets wet, it can turn all sorts of colors. It can turn mauves and ochres and sort of oranges, but then sometimes, because of either material or stones that have been washed up on the beach, it can turn gray and dead color. So I use the black, which is called ivory black, and it means it turns things into a dead tone. There is some value to it. As you can see, this tone can't be accomplished by using anything else but the black, but I use it rarely. Using black is not a good idea unless it's for a specific purpose. Here we have. Now I've got to bring you a very pale strip of beach there that is just a touch of yellow ochre and plenty of white, and put on because the beach here happens to be extremely brilliant, and it sort of turns the corner here and goes off into the distance there. It gives me a nice background for the dark grasses that are going to be that are growing on these mounds here on the right side of the canvas. I think I'm going to get rid of that little pinkish tone. I don't know how it got in there, and I'm not interested in it anymore, and I need to find a way of eliminating it. I think I'll just run the brush across it and get rid of that pink tone. Corrections as you work are vital to the success of a picture. If you recognize that there is an error that has been made or something that doesn't appeal to you, then you can correct it on the spot, and probably must correct it on the spot. The chances of your being back in that area, again, unless you purposely go and find a way to get there, are remote. Before I take a very short break in the middle of this, I'm going to designate these little pebbles in the foreground only, because in the distance they get out of focus. But here in the foreground, it's vital to show these little sunlit stones, and they're mixed in with some darker ones. So while the opportunity is at hand, I'll take a break for a very short moment. Don't go too far away. I'll be right back. Back again for the final conclusion, the last few minutes of this particular study of Huntington Harbor, a little cove, another one of these little jewels that is set in the Long Island landscape and available to everyone to see. There is a road as you look at this monitor, and as we progress, you will see that cars are running past the distance here. There is obviously a street, a road, or whatever, and it is well traveled. You can, in fact, visit this lovely spot on your own. It is not an imagined place. It is definitely here, and it is of great interest to me to know that these places, even though the urban sprawl has put an awful lot of this stuff in jeopardy, there is still an awful lot of lovely little hideaway places just about everywhere on this island, which is 125 miles of sometimes visual wonder. This channel now, this Long Island one, goes clear out to eastern Suffolk, and then it goes clear over to western Suffolk and in the middle as well. So here is this program, which deals an awful lot with deals almost exclusively with local origination, can introduce you, take you to these various places, and then it'll be entirely up to you and your initiative to go find them and possibly to enjoy and realize that when you have to pay that tax bill within the next few days or months, that that tax bill it enables you to live among this visually wonderful place. Even though I find the mountains wonderful, every time I come back up here, I realize that the treasures of Long Island are almost boundless. I think something has to probably be done to to maybe quell, stop, and slow down the incredible growth of the supermarkets and the super malls and things that are really putting an awful lot of this island in jeopardy. I think the progress is fine, but there comes a point, in my opinion, where aesthetics must not be sacrificed for the sake of progress, and there's an enormous possibility that profit is going to sacrifice a lot of things which we can never get back again. I have yet to read in the paper somewhere that a mall has closed, gone out of business, and that the county or state or country has taken it unto themselves to put back what was there before the mall came in. That is not happening, and I doubt that it ever will. It's probably an artist's pipe dream to think that that would be great. But there are people who would grab their stomachs and laugh themselves to death if they heard that I would have a plan that closed malls would have to restore the land to its original condition. The coal mining has attempted to do that, and it has not worked very well. So wherever those strip mines took place, that land has been devastated and will probably remain devastated for as long as anybody can remember. Here is the introduction of another green, slightly grayer a little bit, and it's the place where all these wonderful-looking marshes are growing, and the beach grasses and things that are really hurt the feet if you decide to walk on them. But it's the habitat of Long Island's favorite hermit, the hermit crab. These little creatures live in all of these marshlands, and they're probably about as funny a bunch of animals as you can possibly imagine. If you're ever down in these areas, take a moment and get down on your haunches and take a look at the fiddler crab. It is hilarious. It's probably one of the silliest looking little animals. He's completely out of balance. He's got one claw much too big for him, and he waves it around like somebody looking for the peanut vendor at a ball game, and he's got a silly face, but he's absolutely endearing, and he's indestructible. No matter what you do, that fiddler crab somehow manages to come back every year. He crawls out of these places, and there he is, crawling in and out of the marshlands and doing whatever he does to make more. So little fiddler crabs are another one of these lovely gifts here. A lot of people don't feel very happy about the something called a horseshoe crab, which is also evident in most of our coastlines here on Long Island later on in the summer. But I kind of like horseshoe crabs because they're so independent. They've been here since, well, they're actually dinosaurs. And we have them here on the island just about everywhere in the late summer. But the creatures that live on here, and I did a program recently that has to do with the Nature Center in Smithtown and Setauket, and the event was to bring a live owl into the studio, and I worked live with that and taped it, and it's wonderful to see these everything that we have here for our consumption. It would seem to me that hanging out at the mall just may have run its time. Hanging out at the mall, I'm not sure is going to be valuable or even viable anymore. I think that the more that we can introduce, and through programs and stations like this Cablevision, Long Island 1, that this kind of peering into the environment and what we have to offer just may help to have parents take children for free. It doesn't cost anything. I'm sure that anybody who takes a child to the mall of a Saturday knows that it's going to cost them a fast disappearing $20 at least to either entertain the child at the mall for a very short period of time, and also in which the child doesn't get very much and comes away either having lost the video game or having spent a great deal of money with very little to show for it. However, if you can translate that kind of an activity into a different one and take what there is to offer here on the island to these, take children and show them what there is. The nature centers, there are a number of them. The Arboretum in down in Central and Middle Island, and the other places that are advertised constantly. I mean, you will see them advertised in the paper continuously. Just take advantage of them, and I think maybe that horror of horrors, like hanging out at the mall, may, in fact, have seen its day and may be on its way out. Maybe a pipe dream, and maybe because I don't find much production involved in hanging out at the mall, but also that I don't think that it adds very much to the quality of life for a child. So enough of that lecture. Let me tell you what I've done here. I've done this, prepared this background, combination of brush and palette knife, and I'm working my way back towards these rocks. The rocks, by the way, besides water and the human face, is one of the most difficult things to paint. And if you ever decide that you want to do rocks, gird yourself for failure a number of times along the way, because they are extremely difficult to do. I may find myself in terrible trouble. They are a particular color, of course. Sometimes the colors vary. These look to me as though they are probably remnants of the great Wisconsin glacier. They are more than likely what I call Connecticut granite. It's what came scooting on down here in that great cataclysm way back when, and spewed and strewn our beaches with these wonderful gray stones. Here's the way I do stones. I will put the light in first, and then put the dark side of the bottom part of the stone in right away, so that I can overlay the next one. So here is the gray side, or the shadow side, of this stone. Very interpretive. I am not doing a study of stones. I'm showing you a technique of how to do it. The manner in which I'm doing it is much too quick, but as usual, time is running out. And I just want to show you how you overlay. After you've put a dark tone on for the shadow side of the stone, then you go back to the gray, to the pale gray, and you overlap it, like this. Here is the next stone that is overlapping that one. And the same thing happens as you go along, using the reference material, of course, as usual. But as you can see, this stone is overlapping that one, and you work it in layers as you go. I don't want to scare anybody about doing stones, because stones, especially on this island, are prevalent everywhere because of that glacier that I just talked about, and they make for wonderful compositional varieties. But here is a kind of I'm going to introduce a little bit of brushwork here, because there is a need to just show you that this is the way this particular stone is built, and it has a shadow side here. So you observe stones, look at them, especially these nice big wonderful boulders. I'm sure that if there is a rock person in my audience and they heard me call it Connecticut granite, they'll probably say, well, she really doesn't know what she's talking about. But I give names to things, and if I understand what I'm talking about in my color notations, if I were to do a sketch of this and I would say Connecticut granite, I would know just exactly what color I'm after. Well, as time is running out, and I may be able to just wind this program up by putting some more stones in here, I just want to show you how the beach grass is applied with very, very liquid paint and a very tiny brush. Here's a really tiny brush, almost no bristles at all, making it extremely liquid, probably a touch of ochre and maybe a lot of white, and see if I can give you the feeling of these grasses way over to the right side of the picture. They are typical of Long Island beach scenes, and they are to be done after everything is pretty well set. They're very pale, especially at this time of year. They have not turned and gotten darker or greener. They are just beginning to be what they are, and this is another question of layering this foreground weeds and grasses. The paint has set well enough for me to be able to do this. And the rest of it is obvious. It's just a repetition and making this all extremely typical of these wonderful pale grasses that you will find in a lot of the coves. Well, here we have it. Once again, I have jabbered away at you for another half hour of endless chatter. I hope something helped you with what I was talking about. In the meantime, Now, whenever you decide that you want to paint something, try to do it from life. That's my whole thrust. Goodbye. Thanks for watching. Tune in whenever you can.